to bear with me also. Great. So let's start the session. It's 6:35. I'm sure other participants will keep joining. Vikas, Dr. Vikas, if you could just put a reminder message in the WhatsApp group, that will be great. So namaste everyone. Good evening. This is the second week of our online 2-week certificate course on Indian knowledge systems, navigating the scope and extent. And we are happy to see many participants join us. This is, I think, our 6th session. Dr. Kapilji, we have completed around, no, this is our 7th session, right? We have completed around 6 sessions with various other experts, and we started with Professor Mala Kapadia. She spoke of whether Bharatiya Gyan Parampara is a way forward or a U-turn. Then we had Shri Kapil Bhatia from Management Studies speaking about Bharatiya Itihas from the prism of management. We had an IKS practitioner, Shri Hitarth Pandya, talking about IKS in action through his module of environment education. We had Dr. Saswati Bordoloi from Assam Royal Global University. She spoke of integrating IKS into different disciplines. Yesterday's session, we had Shivakumarji from Indic Academy, and he spoke of the foundational elements of IKS, especially from the prism of ontology and epistemology. So we have had these 7 lectures so far, and yours is the 7th one, and we have 3 more to go on 12th, 13th, and 14th. So first of all, I am grateful and honored that you agreed to participate in this IKS certificate course as a resource person, as an expert, and you have honored our invitation. So on behalf of my team at the Nucleus of Learning and Development and GNVS Institute of Management, Mumbai, which is collaborating with us for this certificate course, I am honored to invite you on this platform, and we are all excitedly looking forward to your session. So welcome, Kapilji. Yeah, I will now formally introduce Dr. Kapil Kumar Bhattacharya. Kapilji is an assistant professor at the Bhawanipur Education Society College, Kolkata. He works in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. So he is a mass communication and journalism scholar, teacher, like myself and Dr. Vikas. So it's great to have somebody from the mass communication background, and I'm sure some of our participants are also from the journalism and mass communication background. Kapilji completed his doctoral studies as a UGC research fellow, first as a junior research fellow, and then as a senior research fellow from Vishwa Bharati, Shanti Niketan. And post his PhD completion, he briefly taught at Vishwa Bharati as a guest teacher. He has authored 2 books, one of which I'm going to project on screen after I introduce him. So he has authored 2 books, and he has contributed many research papers in various reputed national and international journals. He has also contributed to edited book volumes. His research interests are ancient Indian communication thought, ancient Indian research thought, which is what he is going to speak to us about today, mindful communication, education, and applied communication studies. His PhD subject, which I would request him to speak about later once he ends the session, was around Natya Shastra, and based on his PhD work, he has authored a book, and I'm going to project it on screen if you can see. He's the author of this book, Natya Shastra, a study on continuity and progress of Indian communication, theorizing and praxis. The co-authors of this book are Professor Biplab Loho Chaudhary and Professor Ramesh Rao. So later in the course of the lecture, Kapilji, we would request you to also speak about your PhD research and how you transformed it into a book. And I will be sharing the link of this book both here in the chat box as well as in our WhatsApp group. So it is our honor to have Kapilji throw some light on the topic of tracing the roots of research, the Indian perspective. All of us here as academics, scholars, faculty members, I'm sure all of us are engaged in research in some or the other way. So it will be interesting to understand research from the Bharatiya perspective, how it can be approached, how it can be executed, what is the history, what is the antiquity, what are the challenges, and what are the strengths. So I now invite Dr. Kapil Kumar Bhattacharya to take over the session. And once again, thank you, Kapilji, for being there with us on our platform.
Thank you, Nidhi. You have given a very generous introduction of me. I do not know about the scholar part, but yes, I like to research. Research is something which is very close to my heart, and yes, that is something which I love doing. Uh, I'll of course start the screen sharing, but I put it on hold for the moment because I wanted to give some background to the talk today. So let me begin by extending my greetings to all the participants here. My namaskars, good evening to all of you. And I do not know if anyone here is from any other part of the world. So in any case, very hearty greetings from my end. Uh, when Nidhi first told me about this course, and Nidhi actually gave me options. She said, okay, what do you want to talk about? I said, I would, of course, love to talk about uh, communication, ancient Indian communication thought, which is something I have been researching for the last almost 12 years. And in fact, my PhD thesis is on that. So that is something which is, of course, my first go-to thing. But then I thought, okay, no, let me, take a bit different approach. Let me talk about ancient Indian research thought a bit. Let me share, because that is something we have not, at least in mainstream studies, we have not discussed a lot about, right? Nidhi was saying that I think yesterday or the last speaker of this course, he might have discussed about ontology and epistemology. I'm particularly fascinated about epistemology because I feel that our philosophical underpinnings of epistemology in India, they are largely grounded in Western concepts of research, and that is something which first struck me when I started working on my PhD work, because I had to go through many ancient texts, and I found that there are so wonderful concepts related to research in ancient Indian texts, and I started wondering that why we haven't explored them as epistemological tools in our pursuit of knowledge. And instead, I have nothing against the Western approaches to research. Yes, all I believe what the Rigvedic sages said. It said in the Rig Veda that the truth is one. Only the wise, approach that truth in different directions. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. So yes, the Western scholars, they are also on the right path, but we also have our path, and that is something we should also try to excavate and reintroduce in our uh, studies. So my the topic of my talk today would be tracing the roots of research, and I'm going to start the screen sharing now. So I think it is already there with you. You already know the topic. So just bear with me for 1 minute.
There's a very interesting comment by one of our participants. She's Nivedita Mukherjee. She's saying, we have seen Kapil Dev bowling. We have heard Dr. Kapil Kapoor. Today, we are going to hear Dr. Kapil Kumar Bhattacharya. So she's happy to be
Okay.
part of the session. Thank you, Nivedita ji. That's encouraging.
I don't know how much I'm going to keep. I'm going to be able to keep an expectation, but coincidentally, I have had the opportunity of interacting a bit with Dr. Kapil Kapoorji, Professor Kapil Kapoorji. He is one of the prominent figures in Indian knowledge systems.
Correct.
His
Yes.
work is just amazing. And
Yes.
incidentally, my father named me Kapil because at that point, India just won the World Cup, 83 World Cup. So yeah, it's just a nice coincidence. But let's see if I can live up to her expectation. Okay. So yes, the topic of my talk today is tracing the roots of research, the Indian perspective. Now, I would start a bit with what is research. Uh, See, the first thing that drives research, of course, is the quest for any new knowledge, curiosity. It is initiated by curiosity. But then, not everything is worth research, and that is something which we will also discuss later on. So there has to be some system to this approach to new knowledge, and preferably, it should try to add something to the knowledge pool of the subject concerned. Mind you, however, research is not something which happens out of nowhere. There is a sense of continuity to research. You know, every next research is actually a continuation of some earlier research. But then there must have been a time when this process started, and therefore, research even in research also we talk about different types of research. There is pure research, or basic research, applied action. Those are also things which I will touch upon briefly. But yes, when we talk about particularly modern the research, it is expected to be something which is likely to add to the knowledge pool available at a given point of time and space. Say, for instance, if we talk about the research that was done surrounding the COVID-19 virus, it was not something which started from nowhere. Research on coronavirus had been ongoing since the 1960s. And what our scientists did during the time of COVID-19, they updated on that already available knowledge and, enhanced the knowledge pool. And of course, research is expected to have some, utilitarian aspect to it as well. So it should offer some solution. Now, why I'm saying this? Because this quest for new knowledge, it is not something which is unique to our age or maybe the last 100 years or 200 years. That is something which has driven the human civilization for thousands of years, and it could not have been any different in case of the ancient Indian thinkers. For the moment, if we do not use the word sages, also we can just call them philosophers, thinkers. They must have also thought, and they must have thought in a grand way, as we see when we go through texts like the Rig Veda. So given one instance, like in the Rig Veda, there is one particular passage which is known as the Nasidiya Shukta, where the sages, they are trying to figure out what is the source of this universe. Where was the beginning? Where did it all come from? And that is something which is boggling scientists even today, that what is the source of the birth of this universe? Yes, some say it was in the form of energy that was converted to matter, classic case of physics, where one form gives shape to another form, but there must have been some source. And when we look at the Nasidiya Shukta, we see that the sages are contemplating on that. What was there when nothing existed? There must have been a time, you look at the moon today or the other planets today, somewhere there is no air, somewhere there is no water. What is so special about this earth? How did all of this come from? So yes, thinking. This urge to know what we do not know, that is at the heart of every research. The question is, okay, research is fine, but why? Why do we need to do research? See, first thing is, research, I feel, is a natural human tendency. It is not something which only the researchers do. It is something which is very common with any thinking individual, any thinking human. I'll give you a few simple instances. Say, for instance, wake up in the morning and see that, there is no water in the tap, right? Instantly, our mind starts to think, okay, what is wrong? Is there something wrong with the, pipeline? Is something wrong with the tank? Or is it something wrong anywhere else? We are naturally inclined towards curiosity. We want to find explanations to unexplained phenomena. That is natural human tendency. Whatever we cannot explain, that tends to bother us. So it is a natural human tendency of being curious, of trying to think deeper, trying to identify what is the problem. And then, once you get to the root cause of the problem, try to address it. Now, it can extend from, simple things to, great many serious things. But yes, everything starts with this natural human tendency of, curiosity. Second, enhancing the human knowledge pool. That is something we've been doing for, centuries, thousands of years. Every knowledge that is today, it's not something unique. It is not something absolutely new. No, there is no such thing as, completely new in research. We are only enhancing the human knowledge pool. What we are doing today, we are contributing, and our future generations will build upon that. There is no such thing as absolutely original or, absolutely new. And that is the reason why a distinction is made between the Shrutis and the Smritis in ancient Indian texts. And in fact, many in many places it is said that the Vedas, they are not written by human beings. They come from the gods. I'm not going to that discussion, but the point is, whatever came after the Vedas, since then, we have only, continued to enhance the human knowledge pool. It's not something original. Everything has its root source somewhere. We are only adding up the numbers, right? Now, practical utility. Yes, you need to understand the phenomenon properly, because, unless you understand the phenomenon properly, you cannot explain it properly. And if you cannot explain it properly, you cannot understand what is wrong with it. So these are aspects, which are very much vital to find, some purpose to research. Otherwise, why should we do research? Action research, as I said, finding solutions to immediate problems and, improving human lives in the long run. Now, in the last lecture, I think someone has already told about epistemology. I would just, briefly like to discuss about, the different philosophical foundations of this, the cycle of knowledge. See, everything starts with this curiosity to understand the fundamental nature or reality. So it is ontology. We are trying to first understand what it is. Then we are trying to understand, why it is, or what is the purpose of the existence of a phenomenon. Then, why is it acting in a particular manner? That is praxeology. And axiology is something, which tries to explain, what should be done about it as human beings, how are we to exercise it. But mind you, all these things cannot be done unless we know how does one know what one seeks to know. That is epistemology. We have to first know how to know. And therefore, it goes from ontology to teleology to praxeology to axiology and then epistemology. The fundamental question, okay, fine, we know what to know. We want to know why it works in a particular manner, but then the question remains how to understand that phenomenon. That is the role of research. Research is about, epistemology. Once you know how to approach a particular subject or how to approach the study of a particular phenomenon, you again go back to the first question, because you have figured out, what is the way out, and then you go back to, yes, okay, what is the fundamental nature? What is the purpose? Why does a phenomenon act? So everything starts from this basic premise, how to know. Unless you have the resources, unless you have the tools, unless you know the approaches, you cannot proceed. In fact, there is a very fascinating phrase which is used these days, that is scientific approach to research. Uh, I'm often asked that is there an unscientific approach to research? Well, technically not, but yes, there are times now also there's a lot of knowledge which is based on intuition, but intuition is not considered as a valid form of, research or understanding a subject. So you have to understand first what is the correct way of approaching a particular phenomenon. Now I come to the Indian knowledge tradition. Right. Now, mind you, these are only glimpses of the Indian knowledge tradition. Right. First, of course, Gaveshana. That is a very interesting word which I will discuss in detail in the next few slides. But for the moment, it should suffice that Gaveshana means research. So first, you start working on it. You know what to do the research on, how to do the research. And then you talk about the valid means of knowledge accumulation. There is this interesting idea in Indian philosophy of pramanas. Pramanas mean, the valid means of acquiring knowledge. So the different schools of philosophy in ancient India, there are 9 schools of Indian philosophy. Each of these schools, they have their own set of pramanas, and they do not recognize the other pramanas. Now, based on these pramanas, then you go to find prama. What is prama? Prama is valid knowledge. Now, there is a distinction which is made between jnana and prama. Usually, what we call jnana, we think jnana is knowledge. Jnana is not knowledge. Jnana is cognition. See, our eyes see everything, our ears they hear everything, our nose it smells everything. But in order to understand what it is, to make sense out of it, the signals have to be sent to the brain. So jnana and prama, they are not the same thing. Jnana is any form of cognition, whereas prama is true cognition or knowledge. In fact, there is this interesting idea in Indian philosophy of illusion, maya. And there is this classic example where, the Nyaya philosophers used to give this example of a rope on the middle of a road. And, someone may, think of that rope to be a snake, but that does not mean that that rope is a snake. So the cognition here is of a snake, but in reality, it is not a snake. It is just a rope. So there is a differentiation made between cognition and true cognition or knowledge. So in order to get that prama, you have to use either of these, pramanas. It may be pratyaksha, and there are different pramanas. Pratyaksha, like it is perception, when directly you are seeing. And what happens in case of a rope is, if you are not able to view the rope properly, then you might, mistake it for a snake. So here you are not having pratyaksha, and that is why it is, leading to illusion, right? Anumana. Anumana means inference. Based on, seeing a rope, you try to infer. But, if your inference is not correct, you will infer it wrongly as a snake, right? So there are different pramanas of the different schools of philosophy. Based on those pramanas, applying those pramanas, you go to prama. And then once you have established, at that least you think that this is valid knowledge, this is true cognition, I have found something which is new, innovative, interesting, and which I think is valid, then it is the time to go for a discussion with the others. In ancient India, we had this very wonderful tradition of, debating, which is known as Vada. So it's like, if you have knowledge, it does not mean that, you just think that it is true and all of that. No, you have to enter into a debate with the, scholars from the other schools of thought. And you have to discuss with them. There would be proper, debate sessions held, and they would, deliberate on the various aspects of whatever knowledge you have to offer. And only if you are a winner in that debate, then only your knowledge would be accepted as right or true. So Vada, you have to talk, you have to interact with others, you have to share your knowledge with other, scholars in the field. You have to test yourself. That's the word. You have to test yourself. You just cannot, make a finding, make a discovery, and assume for yourself that whatever I have thought, that is good, great, wonderful. No, you have to test it out by discussing it with other people. Then only, you can claim that it is valid knowledge, and then you can go for, theorizing. In fact, in the ancient texts, we also come across the references to theory building. Now, that is something I don't know about other fields, but in my particular field of communication studies, our scholars, they have not done much of theorizing. There is very little theorizing that has been done. All we do is, we are trying to, uh, adapt and improvise on the theories they have been given by the Western scholars. But in the Indian knowledge tradition, there is a very healthy approach to, theory building. And there are different types of theories which have been discussed. In fact, specifically 4 types of theories that have been discussed. You can find those theories in both the Nyaya Sutras and the Charaka Samhita. I'll also discuss the 4 theories later. Now, we often talk about limitation. That is something which has become a pet word in research. What is the limitation of the study? It's not like the ancient Indian sages. They did not recognize that there could be any limitations. No. It wasn't that they said that, whatever we say is good, great, wonderful. No, they recognize that there are certain impediments to, success or siddhi, accomplishment, that is, right? 3 they identify. One is, ignorance. Ignorance means, where you don't have. And here ignorance is not just about, the lack of information. It might also be having the lack of, the knowledge of resources from where you can get the information. So any form of ignorance, that is an impediment to success. So in order to be successful, you have to first know. We start, when we talk about research, the first thing you need to know is, what is the problem? If you're ignorant of the problem, then there is no point in going about doing research. Then again, if you know the problem, you have to know the resources as well. Right? So yes, any form of ignorance, that is an impediment to success. Disability here, it may refer to different sorts of disability. It might be intellectual disability. Someone, unfortunately, all human beings, they are not gifted with the similar intellectual abilities. Someone may have the intent, but he or she may not have the talent. But someone may have the talent, but that person may not have the willingness. That is also a form of disability. Someone may be lazy. Someone may not have access to resources. Any such form of disability which restricts, approaching the subject in a desirable manner, that is an impediment to success. And lastly, something which I feel is extremely important is, contentment. In the ancient Indian sages would often say that, contentment is the root source of all, stagnation. If you are contented, if you think that, okay, what I have done is good, great, wonderful, there is nothing beyond that, I have done absolutely wonderful job, then it means it is the end of the road for you. The day you think as a researcher that, okay, I've done a wonderful research work, it means it's the end of the road for you, because you cannot progress any further. You are already content with whatever you achieved. There is no further aspiration for you. There is no further, ambition for you. So yes, contentment is also something which, researchers need to avoid. Now, I will talk a bit about this particular word, gaveshana, because that is something which has been subject to a lot of scrutiny, and that is where it all starts from. Now, gaveshana, as we know, is essentially, the search for knowledge, right? But if you look at the earliest instances of, gaveshana, we find that, this particular word has been mentioned at least 5 times. I'm saying at least 5 times because, I have been able to identify this word only 5 times in the Rig Veda. That having said, it does not mean that there cannot be more instances. I'm a man with very limited capability. But I have been able to identify this word having been used for 5 instances in the Rig Veda. But nowhere has this particular word been used strictly in the sense of, search for knowledge. How has it has been used? Well, it has been used in the sense of, the search for cow. And it's interesting how this, search for cow has come to be known as, the, search for knowledge or wish for knowledge. So if you do the Sandhi Viched, in Sanskrit we have the Sandhi Viched where you break a word into two parts. Now this Gaveshana, you can break it into two parts. One is go and the other is Eshana. Go means cow, Eshana means, desire or wish, whatever. So Gaveshana means, wishful cow. Now this is understandable because you have to understand that at that particular point of time, and that is something which has been documented by, many historians, that the cow held a very significant place in the Indian society. And therefore, in history, we find the references to, many battles being fought for, fought over stolen cows and, to reclaim them. So it might not be entirely wrong to say, yes, the roots are in this, search for cow. But it is not just about this physical cow. No. Why? Because in the Rig Veda itself, there is a particular reference where, the goddess of speech, Vach, she has been, compared to a cow, a wish fulfilling cow, because, a cow is an animal, which is very resourceful. A cow gives us milk. In fact, if you look at, a traditional Indian, society, or if you go to the villages even today, there are many applications of the various aspects. Even the cow dung is something which is of, importance. So, in this particular passage, it is a reference, and I'm not sure if you find this reference in many other texts. But yes, I identified it, and I found that there is this particular sutra. It is in Rig Veda Mandala 8, say 8th Mandala, where a reference has been made to the goddess of speech, Vach, who has been compared to a wish fulfilling cow. In fact, we have this idea of Kamdhenu, right? The wish fulfilling cow. So in the Rig Veda, the goddess of speech, she is compared to a wish fulfilling cow. Later on in time, we have this, commentator Dandin, who wrote this work, Kavya Darsha. He also, compared the cow to a well-used speech to a wish-fulfilling cow, and he says that a cow which does not give, which does not give milk is just like speech which is of no use. So somehow there is this association between cow with knowledge. The other interpretation might be because the cow used to be a very prized possession in the Vedic age, and over a period of time, when knowledge also became a very prized possession, and now we talk about knowledge economy, where knowledge is equivalent to power. There, your prized possession, it is very natural that you would have a natural desire or wish for your prized possession, and therefore, in fact, Rishi Aurobindo, he also says, there is this book by Sri Aurobindo, The Secret of the Veda, where he says that these cows, they should not be seen like literal cows. No, they should be seen like cows of light. So accordingly, this word Gaveshana, as we have it today, it has come to signify as the desire or wish for light or knowledge. Okay. Now, Gaveshana, but why? Why research? And I have said a bit about, how the ancient Indian thinkers, they were driven by a lot of questions. Now, what were the fundamental questions of the ancient Indian thinkers? Why they wanted to go for this Gaveshana? Now, some of the fundamental questions in Indian philosophy, you can easily divide them into two parts. One is, of course, the mundane life of a common man. These are, simple questions which we ask ourselves even today. Like, how should a man conduct oneself in life? What is the cause of human suffering? We all want to know, isn't it? Why is that, few people are suffering, a few people are so well off? Is there, something after life, something after death? What is this consciousness? What is illusion? What is ignorance? These are very simple things, which we want answers to. The other is, of course, particularly if we talk about the Vedic sages, they were interested in understanding the true nature of, the soul, the supreme being. What is the real nature or true nature of the universe? What is a man's place in the universe? What is the relation between, an individual soul, the supreme being, and the universe? So these are some of the, fundamental questions of Indian philosophy, which the thinkers of India, since the ancient times, they've been trying to find answers. Some of them, they have been answered, but still, every answer that also raises many other questions. And therefore, many of these questions, they are still being probed by researchers across the globe. But mind you, these questions were raised by the ancient Indian sages thousands of years back. Now, based on the different types of research outputs that we have in ancient India, we can easily classify the different types of research uh, as this is a classification, of course, which is from the modern times, like basic, applied, action. But if we look at the works of the ancient Indian sages, we can easily classify some of those works in either of these categories. So what is the purpose of basic research? It's basically knowledge for the sake of knowledge, right? It said that, that should be the way forward. Knowledge should be, pursued for the sake of knowledge enhancement. That is exactly what the, Vedas and the Upanishads were about, It was not about some particularly practical application always. Of course, if we talk about a few of the Vedas where the rituals, etc., were there, then of course, there was an application part, but most of it was about, knowledge about uh, the soul, God's, the nature of the God, the nature of the universe, what is the relation, the questions that we, touched upon in the earlier slide. So yes, pure or basic research. But there are other texts also, like the Dharma Shastras, the Natya Shastra, which uh, lay down the rules for application. Mind you, not just immediate application, but long-term application. Say, for instance, this particular text, the Natya Shastra, it lays down the rules for dramaturgy. Now that is a text which was written down. I'm not talking about when it was composed. It was written down at least 2,000 years back. But the principles of this text, they have been improvised, they have been adapted, and they have been utilized by different, theoreticians and practitioners in different ways for the last 2,000 years. So applying that research, or the Dharma Shastras, the Dharma Shastras, they were basically, manuals which were prepared based on observing the society of that particular age. And, based on the requirement of that age in order to maintain law and order in the particular society. And based on those, Dharma Shastras, later on they were improvised by the rulers. Now, mind you, I have to add this, and the reason I'm adding this is because, many people feel that, the ancient Indian texts, they are very rigid or they are very dogmatic in nature. I beg to differ. For the simple reason, in almost every ancient Indian text, there is this particular admission by whoever the author is that, do not consider whatever is written in this text to be absolute. Instead, improvise on it based on the requirement of the time and the place. That is something which is there almost in every ancient Indian text. My submission, therefore, is that, if the later generations, they do not improvise, that is not the fault of the particular text or of its author. Right? So to generalize and say that ancient Indian texts, they are very rigid, they are very dogmatic, is actually not a factually correct observation, right? Okay. Now there can be third category of texts also, which are for immediate application, something that we call action research. Action research is something which is meant for what we call here and now settings, something uh, which should have immediate utility. So we have texts like the Charaka Samhita or the Susruta Samhita, which deal with uh, medical applications, which have practical utility in the immediate settings. Then again, I'm saying immediate settings of that particular time. Sometimes I feel one of the reasons why Ayurveda, it has not been able to flourish in our country is because we have not improvised. The problem is that in this text like Charaka Samhita and Susruta Samhita, a detailed explanation is given of the diseases and the ailments that were existing at that particular point of time. But to think that these texts do not need improvisation, that is not right. And therefore, I feel that the scholars of Ayurveda today, they should rather try to improvise on these texts instead of just trying to be very ultra conservative and sticking in a very rigid manner, because that is not something which the original authors recommended. No, the original authors, they have themselves sanctioned that if there is a requirement, please improvise, because you never know what disease is existing today. It may not be existing 300, 400 years later on. Some new disease might come. So therefore, you have to improvise, right? Okay. Now, this is a table which I am particularly, I find it very interesting. Now, what were the philosophical underpinnings or motivational factors of the ancient Indian sages? Because that is important. If we say that India had a great research tradition, we also need to know what were the philosophical underpinnings. First, about basic research. As simple as that, the ancient Indian sages, they wanted to know about this relation between man, universe, and the supreme being. They understood and they wanted to know, what is the source of the origin, who controls the universe, what is the source of the universe, who controls the universe, who is behind all of this. It was not about application part. They were just too curious. They had so many questions. There were so many unexplained mysteries of nature, which they wanted to unravel, right? Motivational factor was, of course, to add to the body of knowledge. And it might have been the case that, the Vedas, they were also, in fact, if we go later in time, if we talk about the explanations of the Vedas, the Upanishads, each of the Upanishads, it adds to the, body of knowledge by taking a different dimension. So if there is one particular Upanishad which looks at, the God aspect, the other part looks at the, human aspect. The other part looks at, the way of conduct of life. So, they are all trying to, enhance the knowledge pool. Expected results, yes, generation of broad conceptualizations in general theories. It was just about, broad theories. I will just talk about the 4 types of theories in the next slide. Applied research, yes, as I said, in case of the Dharma Shastras or the Natya Shastra, it was about, anticipating the future and, documenting for the future generations, what might be required, so that, that knowledge could be preserved and applied later on, right? Motivational factors, yes, if any correction is required to an earlier work, that should be done here, so that, wrong knowledge that does not get passed on to the future generations. Expected results, long-term applications, as in the case of applied research. I've already said, in case of the Dharma Shastras or the Natya Shastra, it was about, long-term application, not, short-term. Action research, immediacy. We do not know. It might have been the case that in particular in case of Charaka or Susruta, there might have been an epidemic at that point of time, and therefore they might have felt that it is the right time to write a treatise. The point is, they were addressing, the pressing issues of that particular age, which would help the practitioners of that particular time, right? So the focus was on, giving immediate solutions in that particular time and space, right? And the expected result is that, that knowledge should have some value, right? And that is why Charak Samhita and Shushu Samhita, they were so much, important and popular among practitioners of that age, because, whatever the problem was, the ailment was, the solutions could be found in these texts and they could be applied. Okay. Now I come to the 4 types of theories, which I said, you find the reference to these theories in 2 texts. One is the Charak Samhita, the other is the Nyaya Sutra. 4 types of theories. One, they say, there are certain theories which are accepted by all schools of thought. Now, here schools of thought mean, it might refer to the 9 schools of Indian philosophy as well. It might refer to the different schools of general knowledge or awareness also. Say the school of aesthetics, the school of ethics, the school of application or something like. Or say, for instance, if I take if I take the example of the Natya Shastra. Now, the Natya Shastra is something, is a text which deliberates on drama, of course. But the problem with drama is it also requires an in-depth knowledge of music. You also have to know dance. So if you say that, there are 3 schools of interest for this particular text. One is the school of music. One is the school of dance. One is the school of drama. Now there will be a few theories, which will be recognized by all these schools. Say if you talk about the rasa theory. The rasa theory is something which is recognized by all the 3 schools: dance, drama, and music. Right. So these type of theories, they are known as general theories, which have uniform application, and they are called the Sarva Tantra. Sarva means all, Sarva Tantra Siddhanta. Then there are limited theories, theories which are existing, but they are not recognized in their original form by all the schools of thought. So there have to be, variations. Say, for instance, if I talk about this particular rasa theory, it's very interesting. I sometimes don't know whether I should call it Sarva Tantra or whether I should call it Prati Tantra, because in the rasa theory also there are divisions. There are certain scholars who say that the rasas are 8 in number. There are certain schools of thought which say the rasas are 9 in number. Incidentally, in and I made this observation in my thesis. When Bharatamuni was writing, initially he talks of only 4 rasas. Now the question is, which is the correct number? Is it 4 rasas? Is it 8 rasas? Is it 9 rasas? Now that is something which, all the theories they accept there is something called rasa. Yes, rasa is something which is very important from the standpoint of aesthetics. But what about the number? There is a variation. Some say it is 4, some say it is 9, some say it is 8. So, it is recognized, but it is recognized with variations. So it is Pratitantra Siddhanta. Then there can be certain theories, which are indicative in nature. They may not be foolproof themselves, but they hint that, it indicates the existence of certain other theories. I cannot think of an example right now, but yeah, what can we say? Okay. Possibility or existence of other theories. Okay, fine. Now, if we talk of, this particular theory of Dhwani, right? Now, Dhwani is a theory, which deals with, meaning. Now, meaning is something which is associated with, communication. Now, mind you, that the Dhwani theory, it specifically deliberates on meaning only. It is concerned when Anandavardhan, he talks about the Dhwani theory, he is concerned only with the meaning. He is not concerned about the message. But since meaning is something, which is associated with communication, it is, Where there is meaning, there must be some communication. Therefore, the theory of Dhvani, it indicates that, there must be some other theory which is directly related to communication, which must have been related to communication in ancient India, right? So here is one theory which indicates the possibility of another theory. So that is indicative theory. And last is something working theory. This is something we always apply. We apply a lot in our daily lives. But I will give you one example with which you can be able to relate better. Now, working theory is something which is very temporary in nature, but accepted based on the validity of its existing, accepted based on its existing validity. A classic example is, medical research. Say for instance, today you go to a doctor, and coincidentally both me and Nidhi, we are suffering from cough and cold. So if you go to a doctor, whatever medicines the doctor will prescribe today, they will definitely be different from the medicines that were prescribed 10 years back, right? And I'm pretty sure the medicines that are prescribed today, they are not going to be in the market after 10 years also. Why? Because we are constantly upgrading. So a medicine which is in the market today based on research, ongoing research, that is true for today. It does not mean that that medicine is not good. But if something better comes tomorrow, then we upgrade ourselves to that next proposition. Similarly, there are certain theories which are taken as working theories, but they are not permanent in a sense that in the future there is subject to change. They may change with further development, further innovation. A classic example is we all of the researchers here, they like to give this idea of working papers. What do you do in working papers? Posit ideas. And but you say that it is a working paper, so it is something which is not absolute. It is subject to change at future. But for the moment, yes, you can take it. Because the research that I have done till this point, it indicates to this particular angle. Right? So yes, 4 types of theories. Now the question is, and that is something again which many times it is said that in ancient India it was all about theories, all theory. So is it about just theory? Is research or knowledge just about theory? No. It's very interesting that if you look at the ancient texts of India, they're classified into 2 broad categories. So there is one category that is called the Jnana Kanda, which is theory oriented or wisdom oriented. And then there is the other, which is known as the Karma Kanda or the action oriented. So, research has to lead to knowledge which should have both theoretical implications as well as practical application. So if you look at the Vedas, in the Vedas, particularly if you go through the Atharva Veda, there are lots and lots of rituals, practices, sacrifices, etc. It's not just about, yes, knowing about God is good. Okay, you get to know what is God, good. But the question is, how can you get close to God? There are different ways. I'm not saying that a ritual is the only way. There are different ways. In fact, Swami Vivekananda, he used to say that there are 4 different ways of attaining God. You can attain God through love. You can attain God through knowledge. You can attain God through work. You can attain God through meditation. Different paths. Therefore, he talks about the 4 yogas: Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. So the application part has to be also there. It is not just about just knowing, okay, I read a lot of books. I have acquired a great deal of knowledge. In fact, there is this very interesting conversation, if my memory serves me right, it is a conversation between sage Narada and, Sanat Kumar, another great philosopher. So, sage Narada, he goes to Sharat Kumar and says that, I want to know the truth of this universe, the true nature of God. And Sharat Kumar says, okay, first tell me what you know. Because unless I know what you know, how can I add to that knowledge? And Sage Narada, he gives a long list of the books that he knows. The four Vedas, this many Upanishads, the Puranas, the Shastras, the different, uh, texts on music, art, aesthetics. Then Sanatma says that, okay, fine. So you have read all of this text, then where is the problem? He says, I don't know the practical aspect of it. So, theory alone is not going to be good. It has to be a mix of both. There should be theory. Theory, of course, we need. Studying, contemplation, yes, knowledge of the true nature of something. These are all good. But there should be a practical aspect. Here again, I must add, there is again a popular misconception. I think some of that misconception comes from this idea of nishkama karma in the Bhagavad Gita, where Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that you should work for the sake of work, you should have no attachment. Now, which has led many people to think that okay, in India, in Indian philosophy, there is no place for attachment. That is actually not right. That is actually not right. See, this idea of nishkama karma, that applies to a particular context. But if you go through the ancient Indian texts, you will understand that, the ancient Indian sages, they recognized desire as a part of human life. Then there is no point in running away from it. In fact, that is the reason why life was divided into 4 stages. And Grihastha was one part of it. So yes, desire is very much a part of life. There's nothing wrong in thinking that, okay, I want to earn some money. Fine. But what is required is that, it should come through honest resources. If you look at the 4 Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Moksha is something which is, of course, we can keep it away. It is not meant for ordinary human beings. Ordinary human beings cannot achieve moksha. It is meant only for the highest people. But Dharma, Artha, Kama, these are meant for everybody. The interesting thing is, Artha, you need Artha to survive. And Kama, that is desire, that is a part of life. But Dharma is there because it is the regulator. It is the balancing act. And this is something which I find come across a lot in Instagram and different social media platforms today these days. There is this big talk about balancing. You should lead a balanced life and all of that. The idea of balance is ingrained in this concept of Purushartha. Life is all about, balancing. Yes, you will need Artha, you will have desire, but all your actions need to be regulated by Dharma. That is the way of life. That is the way of life. So yes, theoretical knowledge, again, as I said, this idea of Purushartha, it looks great, isn't it? It sounds good to hear. But my point is you have to apply it in real life. How? Yes, you accept Artha and Kama as very much a part of life. But you also recognize Dharma as an essential part of life. And you regulate your life based on this idea of Purushartha. That is the application part. So it's not just about theory. Okay. Now,
Kapilji, just giving you a time check. It's 7:34.
Yeah, I think I'm exceeding, so I'd just like to.
No, I think you can go on for 10 minutes and then we can break for discussion and questions.
Yeah, fine. So yes, if we talk about, the different ways of research or why research, I said there. So yes, the first thing we need to ask whether there is a genuine problem or not. Step 2 is whether a solution is there, because there are so many problems in this world, in life. Whether a solution is necessary or not, that is also important. The third is you need to check, whether that solution is required at all or not. If it is not required, it's not necessary. In fact, the other day I was seeing a video. Somehow, many of the Gen Z, they have a problem with these pimples. Now, I was hearing a doctor saying that pimple is something very natural. It comes, it goes. And in fact, I recall that it has been the case with me and many of our generation as well. We didn't even bother. Pimples came, they stayed, they went away. Now, if you think that this is such a big problem that its solution is absolutely attainable, then you are wasting your time, because it will go away on its natural course. You have to understand whether the solution is, desirable, whether it is attainable. Then comes the question of the resources. We talk a lot about, how the instrument should be there, the tool should be there. And lastly, whether alternative means are available. So I'll just go to this research design, which is given by Vachashpati Mishra in the Sankhya Tattva Kaumudi. He talks about this five-fold criterion of research. He says that, and this is something which new or beginners researchers might find it interesting. There is this question here, where to find this research problem. So yes, the question is here. The answer is here. First, there must be a visible problem that warrants scientific inquiry. First, you ask whether it requires inquiry or not. Second, the solution should be desirable. The third, it should be attainable. Fourth, the means, the resources, the tools, the techniques, they should be available. And lastly, easier means should not be available elsewhere. If it has already been resolved, please don't stop. Please don't waste your time on that. Okay. So this again is an ancient research design, which again comes from the Sankhya Tattva Kaumudi, where Vachashpati Mishra, he is talking about the 5 stages of research. The first is Taram, which he says is related to study. First, you have to study a problem deeply. The second is oral instruction. So because in ancient India, much of the instruction that was oral, teacher student, the teacher would orally conveys ideas to the student. So therefore, Vachashpati Mishra talks about oral instruction. The third is reasoning or logic, that is Tartaram. So once you have received the instruction from the teacher, you have identified the problem, you get on with the problem, then you have to apply your reasoning or logic. The fourth is very interesting, Ramyaka, which refers to Shuhrit Prapti. Shuhrit means well-wishers, or friends. I will elaborate on it in the next slide. And the last is, Danam. So yes, your every research should be driven by, pure motives, not any ulterior motives. Now, I did a, comparison with these, 5 stages with, modern day research, and I found that they're very interesting. First, if you look at Taram, that is, study. So in Western approach also, we talk about, identification of the problem first. But that you cannot do unless you do a study of it on your research area. So that is the first. As for, Shabda or oral instruction, now since we are in a different time now, so yes, review of literature, that is similar to Shabda, but the difference is here, orally direct instructions are not coming. Instead, we are getting to know the views of the experts by, reading their literature, right? Tartaram or reasoning. Now here comes, after review of literature, we have to formulate a hypothesis. We have to construct devices for observation, measurement. Then, we have to proceed logically, how to go about selecting the sample, how to collect the data, then the data analysis, inference, conclusion. All of this, mind you, falls under this UHA. There's reasoning or logic, because without reasoning, applying the mind, we cannot proceed further. Now, what I said about Shurit Prapti, it is acquisition of friends or well-wishers. I said it in the beginning that, if you keep your knowledge to yourself, it is not going to help. Instead, we have to share our knowledge with others, because that helps us in understanding the gaps in our work. In fact, in research also, there is this idea of, pre-submission, where you have to share your ideas preliminarily. and discuss them with your peers so that you get inputs from them, and uh, work on your research further before submitting the final research report. So here again there is a similarity. And lastly, Sadamuditam, that is Dhanam. As I said that, and particularly the ancient Indian sages, they felt that, every work of knowledge should be done with a pure heart for the betterment of the world. So, yes, you should try to share it with others, share it with maximum people so that, they can also get to work. The other aspect is, unless you contribute your work to the scholarly field, then it might just lead to repetition of the same work over a period of time. So people also need to know what is already being done and what needs to be done after this. So therefore, it's not just about having a pure heart and all of that. There is a practical aspect to it as well. You need to share it with your peers so that others in the field may also get to know what has already been done and what is required to be done after that. I will end by just sharing with you a critical textual analysis method. And why I will share it with you is because I believe a few of you may be interested in ancient Indian texts, but honestly, we do not follow a scientific approach in our reading of the ancient Indian texts. The reason again is because we try to do research on ancient Indian texts based on the research methods given by Western scholars. Right. When I was doing my research, I identified that there is a particular critical textual analysis which was in practice in India since the ancient times, which was used by Abhinava Bharati, which was used by Acharya Abhinavagupta when he was writing the Abhinava Bharati, which is the commentary on the Natya Shastra. So he says that, this particular critical textual analysis method has been used by me. I also use the same method in my research, and I feel that this is a good method for studying ancient Indian texts. So Abhinavagupta, he gives 10 steps of doing a critical textual analysis. Now this is something which is there, very much there in the Abhinava Bharati. I will just very briefly go through that. First, he says that a researcher should concentrate only the acceptable content. Why? Because whenever anyone is reading an ancient text, there will be passages where everything will not be relevant. We should not assume that everything in the ancient text would be relevant to us. No. And therefore, concentrating on the relevant content is very necessary. Keep the other things aside. That is the second step. Marking out the other content. Now, when I say mark out, it doesn't mean that reject them outright. No. Just mark them out because you might need it at some later time. So keep it aside. Third is you have to render meaningfulness to the content, because when you are working as a researcher, you have to make your content meaningful to the readers, to your fellow researchers, right? And it might be the case that the other readers or researchers, they may not be familiar with the terms in that particular text. So when you are working on that text, you have to make it more meaningful with your explanations based on, of course, evidences. Fourth is, contradictions. You have to address the contradictions. Now, here again, Abhinavagupta, he is recognizing that there will be times that there will be contradictions within an original text. Now, you as a researcher, you need to address those contradictions instead of, just trying to justify the contradictions. No. Again, I'm saying improvising. Do not think that any text is, sacrosanct. No. Because if you're doing so, you're not thinking like a researcher. And that is something which was not sanctioned by the ancient Indian sages also. They always said improvise. Do not take everything for face value. So if there is a contradiction in any text, try to understand and address that contradiction instead of just retaining and trying to justify it. Fifth, keeping the spirit of the original work intact. That is important. Do not deviate from the spirit of the original work. Sixth, that is something which is related to point number 5 as well. As much as you should keep the spirit of the original work intact, You should also constantly recall the goal of your research. So you have to balance, again, the balancing act. You have to balance between the spirit of that original work and the purpose of your work. Okay. 7, deliberating on, because ancient Indian texts, they have many words, which may have double meanings, which may be unclear. So you have to, identify them and again explain the meaning to your readers. 8, this is something again very interesting. I have experienced it myself. In ancient Indian texts, you will find that there are many repetitions. Say, for instance, there are many passages in the Vedas which you will find in the Upanishads. There are passages in the Vedas which you will find multiple times also. But do not think that, okay, the Vedic sages, they must have become tired, so they thought, okay, let's not give any new content. Let's just repeat. No. If there is there is a repetition, there is a purpose to it as well. Try to understand what is the purpose of this repetition and explain it to the readers. 9, something which is related to, again, the problem solving aspect of research. Try to arrive at a valid conclusion. And the 10th thing is, Gupta, he says that, good research is always that research which is compact in nature. So a researcher should try to, accomplish the research in as few words as possible. I think personally he might have been, inspired by the idea of the Vedic texts, which are very terse in nature. But yes, brevity is of course a hallmark of any good writing. So yes. That having said, I must say that, it's easier for me to say than for you to implement it if you are interested in that. But yes, as the ancient Indian sages would say that this is something from the Kathopanishad, where it is said that, the path of knowledge, if you take take research as the path of knowledge. So it is said in the Kathopanishad that, research is like, walking on a razor's edge. It's extremely sharp, very difficult. And therefore, you have to be first very alert. You have to stay always on your feet, and you have to, learn from people who have worked earlier in that particular area, instead of thinking that you can manage everything. In any case, research is not something which can be managed entirely on your own. So yes, having said that, all of this has to be done, or it can be done. It's not easy task, but I think with practice and with the guidance of the experts, yes, we can apply the principles of research from the Indian tradition in modern day research as well. That will be it. I know I have been very sketchy. I may not have been very up to the mark as well, but yes, I hope you've got something new. Thank you. Thank you, Nidhi.
Thank you, Kapilji. You were absolutely on point, and I'm sure there are a lot of new insights to draw from your presentation on the ancient Indian tradition of research, because what you rightly said in the beginning of your session is that we are so trained into the ontological and epistemological aspects of doing research in the Western way, that with Indian knowledge systems, this is something new for us. But I'm sure that the scholars and the faculty members in this gathering, they're enthused by this presentation. They have taken a lot. There are a lot of takeaways for them, and they will then probably be able to implement some of these ideas, or at least initiate themselves into this ancient Indian tradition of research gradually. So you were not at all sketchy. I think your presentation was able to provide us a complete overview, which is, I think, needed for a beginner in this domain. So we already have some questions. We have a hand raised by Priyaji. Priyaji, can you please unmute yourself? So let's use the next 10 to 12 minutes for question and answer, discussion, comments on what Kapilji has just spoken about. Yes, Priyaji, is there a question from your end?
No, I'm sorry.
You had
That
raised your...
was mistakenly raised. Sorry.
No
Yeah,
problem, no problem.
I just want to say one thing before this Q&A. If you feel that, there has been something lacking, please let me know that as well, because as I said, this is something which is close to my heart. And even I am also improvising always. I'm also improvising. So yes, I have just tried to share with you something new, which I felt it might inspire you people also to consider, working more on this area. So yes, feel free to be critical as well.
Thank you. So there are appreciative comments in the chat box. Sarita ji saying it was indeed an insightful session. Let's take Nivedita ji's question. She is requesting to suggest few topics that can be explored regarding IKS and teaching English literature. So she's given some examples like, could there be comparative approach to research in IKS and English literature, like Shelley's or Keats' poetry or Wordsworth's nature poetry? So I think she's looking for some guidance. I know that you're not from English literature, but it would be helpful to throw some light.
Well, it is not entirely true. I have a limited knowledge of English literature because I did my graduation in English literature. But yes, interesting question. I think personally, yes, there is a lot of scope, particularly the two theories that I was talking about, the rasa theory and the dhvani theory. Particularly these two theories, they can be very much applied. To think that the theory of rasa would only apply to a poem by Kalidas, that is not right. That is something which applies to a poem by Shakespeare or Wordsworth as well. Again, dhvani, because it is a theory of meaning, that is also something which applies to any form of literature. It's not something which is limited to Sanskrit literature. So yes, definitely there can be a lot of scope. Yes, in fact, I have felt often that we talk a lot about semiotics. If you look at the theories of meaning in ancient India, particularly on this dhvani theory, there can be a lot of interdisciplinary study in semiotics, the study of meaning itself. So far as I know, in fact, the work of Susruta, that in itself was influenced or inspired. I don't know about influence, but yeah, it was inspired by the Nyaya theory of language. So that is very interesting. Unfortunately, we didn't give it a lot of thought. But yes, semiotics, literature, of course, definitely. There's a lot that can be worked upon.
Correct, absolutely. I think there are a few additional comments from participants themselves. Nivedita ji, you can look at what Amisha ji is saying, Indian moksha and American transcendentalism. And there's a comment by Reema ji, English literature themes of Wordsworth largely talk about nature, and that can be related to Indian theory. So please explore these lines of thought, Nivedita ji. Okay, let's take the next question by Samskriti ji. She's thanking you, Kapil ji, for this comprehensive talk. You gave us a glimpse of conducting research from the Bharatiya perspective. She has a question about the art of Hari Katha, Katha Kirtan, which is a combination of storytelling, singing, and dance that is based on extensive knowledge of various scriptures and expertise in music. For such a traditional art form, what kind of research do you suggest? Which Bharatiya theories can be used?
Okay, the simple answer to it will be observation. I think observation is something which has been a hallmark of the Indian intellectual tradition. One is the oral tradition of aspect, where there is an interaction between the teacher and the student. But the other part is observation. There are a lot of things which are understood by people even without saying anything, just by observation. So in India, And that is something we apply in our daily lives as well. There are a lot of things we either know through spoken words or through observation. Particularly if you're talking about any folk form, observation should be a good way. I don't know if you are looking for a specific word on like Indian theory or not. No, specifically not, but observation is something which has been very much a part of the research tradition of India. So that is something which can be applied to study the folk forms.
Okay, Samskriti ji, I hope that answers your question. Okay, there is a question by Dr. Neha Rawal. She's asking, is there any mention of research based on empirical evidence in any of the Indian texts?
Yeah, I just mentioned it, right? I talked about the Charaka Samhita, the Susruta Samhita. They are empirically backed evidences. In fact, when we talk about this particular prama, I talked very briefly about this, pramanas, pratyaksha, anumana, shabda, upamana. There are different pramanas. If we talk about pratyaksha itself, perception, that in itself is about, empirical evidence. That means that, physically you have to perceive, otherwise, you don't recognize as truth. And let me tell you, there are 9 schools of Indian philosophy. If we talk about Ajivika also, so these 9 schools of Indian philosophy, they have, contradictions against each other regarding the other pramanas. But Pratyaksha is one pramana which all the schools of philosophy, they recognize as a valid form of knowledge. So empiricism has been always acknowledged as a valid means of knowledge in the Indian knowledge tradition.
Yes, thank you. I hope, Dr. Neha, you got some answer to your question. Great. Amisha ji, I'll take your question next. Yes, Priya ji, do you have a question? Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, ma'am. So, talking about the Indian theories or the theories related to IKS, I just wanted to mention that I had done my research in narrative techniques of used in fables in Panchatantra and Jatak, and I had used Dr. Ayyappa Panikar's uh, theory of narratology. So it was very interesting. I mean, when I said narratology, I had come across all the Western narratives by so many narratologists, but it was nice to see Dr. Ayyappa Panikar's theory, where he has talked about how Indian narratives are primarily structured, what are the main features, such as they are cyclical in nature. We have a story within a story within a story, like an onion. You unfold
Hmm.
and then you cover. That is one. Or we have lots of fables are used where animals are used to denote human characteristics. So I
Correct.
think, yeah, we do have, although it's modern. I mean, he recently wrote that like in the recent few years, but he bases it all on past texts from IKS. So yeah, that can also be a good reference if anybody wants to see Indian theories. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have not read this particular work, so it would be great if you could share, because
Definitely, sir. Definitely.
because Nidhi ji talked about one book. There is also another book which I wrote,
Yeah.
which has a beginner's bibliography on works which shed light on the Indian communication tradition. And I think this book can be an interesting addition to that as well. So yes.
Definitely. I can share the link on. It was not available readily. It was available only in hard copy on Amazon, but I can share the link on the WhatsApp group.
Yes.
That would be great.
Yeah, please share, Priyaji. I'll pass it on to the other participants as well as to Kapilji. Of course, at least my initial thought in terms of inviting Kapilji to do a session was to request him to speak on the ancient Indian communication tradition. That is what we had in mind because of his expertise in the area. But I think when he suggested this topic, about research in ancient India. I think all of us were very excited and we thought this is a very, very interesting topic, something untouched, something not explored. So I'm glad that we went ahead with this topic. And of course, I will share the links of both of your books with the participants in the WhatsApp group. Let's take a question by Krishna Varmaji. Krishna Varmaji, please unmute kijiye. Yes, Krishna Varmaji, are you there?
Yeah. I'm audible?
Yes, yes, Krishna Varmaji, you are audible.
Okay. Sir, my question is that I just want to be doing in research in humanity, but there is no lab. But what I feel that all the things we have to research into some reading and text and some either we go for the Google form and all. Is there any other things that we can do without lab, just like a scientist and all? Because we are not scientists. I'm the artist, and scientists can do in the lab work, but we do in research in without lab. So is there any process from ancient text like that? I think you understand my questions.
I think Krishna Varmaji had also put his question in the chat box. He's asking for research in humanities, art, and history. Does the ancient research tradition of India have any path ahead? Like, are there any ways to pursue research in these particular subjects from the Bharatiya perspective?
Well, honestly, I cannot say if there are specifically, discipline-specific approaches to research given in the ancient Indian text. But yes, general approaches are there, of course. In fact, I shared one general approach with you people when I talked about this, 5-step research design. So that is a general approach which applies to all disciplines. But if you are talking about discipline-specific, I won't know, because there are so many texts. I have not, delved into the text of history or other, but I'm sure. In fact, I remember one of my professors telling me there is this book called Harsha Charita, where, there is this discussion about, statistical analysis of statistical data analysis. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get the time to go through the text myself. There must be there, right? Because, where there is so much of knowledge generation, there must be, some reference. Unfortunately, the ancient Indian sages, they were not interested. And this is something which I have a request for all of you, since I believe you are interested in Indian knowledge system. Please consider reading, the complete works of, Swami Vivekananda. There are 9 volumes of Swami Vivekananda's complete works. There are discussions on a lot of areas, but his discussions on the ancient Indian knowledge is huge, is immense. So for any beginner, that is a very good starting point. And in one of those papers, he talks about how the ancient Indian sages, they were obsessed with just acquiring knowledge. It was as if they did not have time to deliberate on what the methods were, to explain the methods. They just wanted to gather as much knowledge as was possible for them. And therefore you do not find many references, not in the Vedas, of course, but later when we talk about the Upanishads or when we talk about the later texts, we do get references. But then again, there are so many texts, it's very difficult. In fact, one thing which I did not touch upon, I did not touch upon that particular aspect, because that in itself could have constituted a complete lecture. There is this particular concept of Tantra Yukti in ancient India.
Yeah.
And, these Tantra Yuktis, again, there are different books which prescribe different numbers of Tantra Yuktis. But by and large, the idea is that these Tantra Yuktis are devices which are essential for, research and, documentation of research.
Correct.
So you can pick any book which talks about Tantra Yuktis. it might be Arthashastra also, which has a particular chapter. The last chapter of Arthashastra that deliberates on the Tantra Yuktis. So there are many other texts. In fact, if Nidhiji wants, I can share a particular book which deliberates only on the Tantra Yuktis. I think it was by Professor Jayant Lele. He talks about the Tantra Yuktis, where there is elaborate discussion on how the Tantra Yuktis were utilized by the different schools of Indian philosophy and aesthetics to acquire, new knowledge and document them. So yes, there are many, but specifically if you ask books on history, I give one example, Harsha Charita. It has some references, but I'm not aware of all the books on history. I'm just a student of communication. So yes, you have to bear with me in that.
Yes, but I think it's good that these insights that you're sharing, I think we have to begin somewhere. That's what I believe. So within our own specific disciplinary domains, what we could do is pick up one text, one volume, one piece of literature, and then pursue it, or maybe start with one or two and then see how we want to apply them in research, because the repository of IKS is vast. I mean, you need more than a lifetime to kind of navigate through it. So better to start with some focused reading and some focused, dedicated reading in terms of your own disciplinary affiliation, as well as if you're interested in exploring any specific topic, like the participants from the literature background, you could focus on the elements of nature in our poetry, in IKS related poetry. So I think first identifying these specific areas that you want to work with, and then kind of looking to what methods and approaches and theories are available would help, because then otherwise we would have the the temptation to get lost in this vast pool of IKS, and that can be very challenging. It could also be overwhelming in some sense.
Yeah, and you never know how things are. This critical textual analysis that I just shared with you people, I had no idea it was there in the Abhinava Bharati, because I was looking for Acharya Abhinava Gupta's explanation on the Natya Shastra. I was not looking for a research method there. But when I read the Abhinava Bharati, there I got it. So, we are currently in the process of this, excavation.
Correct.
That is something which is the favorite word of Professor Bimal Disanayak. So I borrow it often from him. So as Nidhiji was saying, I would have been very much more comfortable talking about ancient Indian communication tradition, but I decided to talk on research in the hope that maybe I see 100 people here, maybe out of this 100 people, maybe 50 people think that, okay, maybe we can probe a bit deeper. Say someone from literature, someone from Bengali literature might want to go into some text. Someone from any other literature might also, say in Tamil, we have such a rich reservoir of Tamil literature.
Correct.
I don't know, because I don't know Tamil language.
Correct.
I do not know. Unfortunately, I do not know Tamil language. That is something which I regret. There is so much of literature available from ancient Tamil literature. Who knows what gems are lying there? So the idea is just if more people get interested in this this particular area, because simply saying that IKS is important and IKS is here to stay and we have to, it is not going to work. We also have to find the resources, the tools, the method, how we can systematize this.
Sorry, somebody got unmuted by mistake.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I think there are some important, Kathan Shahji, he has made some comments. He's recommending reading Swami Vivekananda's lectures from Colombo to Almora. I hope I understood it correctly, Kathanji.
Yes. There is a book which refers to his lectures only. So, but you get all of those if you have this complete works of Swami Vivekananda. You will get all of this in any one of these volumes. So, yeah.
Right. I think Krishna Varmaji, you can also look at, you can also read up Kathanji's talking about history. He's talking about using unconventional archival sources, and also about Ramakrishna, short and long publications by Ramakrishna Mission Mutt for any beginner. So I think great.
Yeah, yeah. So yes,
Great.
in fact, in history, I just recalled one particular book. There is this book called I think Raj Tarangini.
Okay.
There is this book, which is again a very interesting book, which throws glimpses on the life and times of that. Yes, by Kalhan Raj Tarangini.
Correct.
So there are so many books which can give us so many things, but it is only going to be possible if we show some interest.
In-
Waiting for someone else to do the
Hmm.
hard work, that is only going to lead to more waste of time. Rather, let us try to join hands and yes.
Yes.
Great.
So I'll just take this last question. This question I also wanted to ask. Amisha ji is asking, Kapil sir, can you please elaborate on your PhD topic? I think you can offer some very closing and brief comments on your PhD thesis. Of course, I'll be sharing the links of both of your books in the WhatsApp group soon.
Okay. My PhD thesis, in one sentence, it would be I did my PhD thesis on the Natya Shastra, which is ascribed to Bharata Muni. But what I did was, I have tried to analyze the Natya Shastra from the standpoint of modern communication. People before me, they tried to analyze communication from the point of view of the Natya Shastra. But as I said, I believe in improvising, and that is something which I have mentioned in my thesis also. That is something which repeatedly Sage Bharata has also said. Please improvise, please improvise. So what I did was, I tried to understand the text of the Natya Shastra from modern communication perspective. So like we talk about, in nonverbal communication, we talk about aspects such as kinesics, proxemics, haptics, etc. But these are things which have been discussed in the Natya Shastra also. I took the other way around. Instead of trying to explain everything that is in the Natya Shastra in terms of communication, I tried to explain modern communication from the standpoint of the Natya Shastra.
Yeah.
Right. That is something. The other thing that I did was, and I don't want to sound pompous, but I think no one else has done it till now. I did a comparative analysis of the Natya Shastra with Aristotle's rhetoric and poetics.
Okay.
So the reason was because in modern communication studies, Aristotle's rhetoric is thought to be the starting point. In fact, much of Western communication scholarship, it owes its origins to Aristotle's rhetoric. So initially, it started with that idea only. So I did a comparative analysis of Natya Shastra with both the rhetoric and the poetics combined. And in the process, of course, I deliberated on the fourfold classification of communication of Sage Bharata. Angika Vinay, that is non-verbal communication, Vachika Vinay, that is vocal communication. I won't say verbal communication, vocal communication. Ahari Abhinay, I prefer saying it auxiliary communication. In fact, and I'm not promoting my book, but I'm just putting it on record. We talk a lot about this personality development and the importance of costumes and how you dress well in communication. These are also aspects which have been discussed in the Natya Shastra. Right. So here we are talking about a text which was 2000 years, which is 2000 years old minimum. I'm talking about just the written text. But these concepts have been discussed. He has discussed how personality is important for communication, how dressing is important for communication, how your facial appearance is important for communication, how your the bodily posture that is important for communication, how your movements, they are important for communication. In fact, he has talked about paralanguage also, because when you talk about vocal communication, we are usually focusing on, words. But he has said that, it's not just the words, it is also about the paralinguistic aspects, the tone, the rhythm, the intonation, the accent, the resonance, the frequency, all of these matter. So it is, in my opinion, the most comprehensive text available from any ancient civilization, available to us today, where human communication has been discussed in its entirety. There is not a single aspect of communication which has been left untouched in the Natya Shastra. In fact, when you talk about the communication that goes within us, intrapersonal, we talk a lot about psychology and all of that, how the human mind works, intrapersonal communication, that has also been, addressed by Sage Bharata. So I've just tried to, document that. Simply put, I've just tried to, place on record the knowledge shared by Bharata Muni in the modern language of English. That is all, because the Natya Shastra is in Sanskrit. It is for people of the present age to understand that. I've just simplified the Natya Shastra, and I have tried to share the same knowledge with the modern generation. That is all.
Wonderful. I think much needed work, especially from the prism of communication scholarship. And thank you, Amisha ji, for asking that question, because I was anyways going to pose this question to Kapil ji. So on that note, I think Prabha Rao ji has made a very good comment in the chat box that IKS has so much food for thought, and there's a lot of takeaways from this session, and it has inspired us to delve deep into and to pour ourselves into our Jnana Parampara. Thank you, Prabha Rao ji. I think that I'm sure that is the takeaway for all of us. And on this note, once again, on behalf of Team NLD and GNVS Institute of Management, Mumbai, I profusely thank Kapil ji for sparing 1.5 hours more rather for this very interesting, insightful, novel session. And I'm glad that you decided to speak on this topic. It's kind of quite inspiring for faculty members and researchers to get these insights and inputs from an erudite scholar like yourself. So thank you for accepting our invitation, and thank you for this wonderful session. And I sincerely hope that in the future we'll stay collaborated, connected, and through these platforms we can engage in fruitful research in the domain of IKS. So thank you. Yes, Dr. Vikas, anything from your end? Yes, there are a few comments from Kathanji, Niveditaji. Natya Shastra is known as the Pancham Veda. Okay, can you please share universities promoting research? My area of research, history of mathematics. I think Dr. Neha can answer that. But I think IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi are doing great work in terms of IKS.
Yes.
Yes. Prabha Rao ji, any last comments from your end? I see your hand raised. Okay. I think it was raised by mistake.
Very enlightening, really. Yeah, our ancient knowledge system is just a repository of knowledge. And we missed that. The Indian logic system, which is based on investigative research, that Anuman and that everything which the Pratyaksh was, these are the 4 stages of knowledge, and that there are so many takeaways of that. It is so interesting, and we need to delve deep into it. Some
Correct.
more digging. The more you dig, the more you get inspired, and you want to learn more and more. as I have said, we need to increase our Gyan Pipasha. That is what.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much,
much,
Patanjali.
Prabharauji, for that insight.
Yeah. The session was very interesting and enlightening. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
We
Thank
just
you. I
wish
think there
that
is
we
some
could have
network
more
issue
time
from your
to.
end, Prabharauji. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Prabharauji. I think there was some
Thank
network
you.
issue, but we could hear you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rajanji, we will definitely share some reading links and some material in the WhatsApp group. Thank you so much. So let's close the session once again. Thank you, Kapilji.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you very much. And many thanks to your organization and the collaborating institute for taking this wonderful initiative on IKS. And I just like to end by making a small request to everyone present here. Let us all try to, encourage others to think about. It's not about, influencing others, but let us at least try to, encourage others to think about IKS. Right.
Correct.
There is so much that can be explored. There is so much that can be done. And that can only be possible if we work hand in hand in collaboration, right? So please all try to encourage your colleagues, your co-workers, your friends to just explore this fascinating world of IKS. Every drop it counts. Every drop it counts to this mighty ocean, right?
Yes.
So please, it is my sincere request to all of you. Please try to convey this message to your friends and well wishers also. It has been a wonderful time uh, talking to you people, and I look forward to more collaboration and interaction with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's a wonderful note to end on, because I think collaboration and sharing is indeed the spirit with which we must approach IKS. So thanks to all the participants for joining and engaging very well in this session. And once again, thank you, Kapilji, and wishing you the best for your future scholarly work. We really look forward to reading more from your end.
Thank you. Thank you, Nidhi.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste. So participants, we will be meeting tomorrow again at 6:30 p.m. for a session with Bhargav Parekhji, who will be talking about Niti Shastra. So hope that these are the last 3 sessions that we will be having. So please join tomorrow's session.